They said the Skinwalkers only mimic what they hear. But last night, the forest spoke first. The echoes knew my name before I entered the dark. Tonight, Dread Scribe writes again. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe for more chilling stories. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. I love seeing where everyone is tuning in from. And if there's a story you'd like me to cover next, I'd love to hear it too. The forest was quiet enough to hear the heartbeat of the earth itself. My boots sank into a layer of pine needles that muffled every step, the air thick with the scent of sap and damp soil. I had come out here alone, a self-proclaimed scientist chasing data, not ghosts, to record nocturnal sounds in one of the most acoustically isolated regions of the Rockies. The night was cold, still, and mathematical in its silence. I remember thinking how sound waves behave like ghosts of their own, bending and echoing through the trunks like invisible ripples. But then the first whisper came. My name, low and familiar, carried on a current of air that shouldn't have existed. At first I blamed my own exhaustion. 3 nights without real sleep, hours spent staring at the flickering red light of my recording device. The rational part of me, the one armed with charts, formulas, and logic, assured me it was nothing more than pareidolia of the ear, the brain mistaking noise for meaning. Yet something in that voice struck the primal chord beneath reason. It wasn't just similar to mine, it was mine, pitch perfect, breath pattern identical. Like hearing an echo from inside your own skull, curiosity overrode fear. I followed the sound deeper into the woods, each step guided by the illusion of recognition. The moonlight fractured across branches like broken glass, creating patterns that shifted as if the forest itself were thinking. I told myself I was chasing a natural anomaly, perhaps infrasound reflecting through uneven terrain. But the further I went, the more the forest's geometry began to warp. Paths looped back to themselves. The moss glowed faintly beneath certain roots, pulsing like a heartbeat I couldn't place. When I finally stopped, the whisper came again. Closer this time, a fraction behind my ear. My breath crystallized in the air as I turned. No one was there, but on the ground next to my own prints were others, same size, same soul pattern, same depth. Perfectly aligned beside mine as though someone had been walking in synchrony. My stomach tightened. I knelt and touched the earth, half hoping it would explain itself, half praying it wouldn't. The soil was still warm. Panic tried to surface, but science was my armor. I told myself about mimetic species, the lyrebird's uncanny mimicry, the way some predators use sound to lure prey. Yet even in those rationalizations, something felt inverted. Those creatures imitate for advantage. This, whatever it was, seemed to observe before it copied. The wind shifted, and the forest exhaled a sound too complex to be coincidence. A soft murmur repeating my breathing rhythm. The trees creaked in harmony, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw a figure ahead, blurred like heat above asphalt. Mirroring my stance, every instinct screamed to turn back. But a deeper instinct, curiosity, that dangerous human flaw, he'd whispered, just one more step, so I did. And in that step, the forest rearranged itself, the compass needle spinning, stars slipping across the sky as if someone had redrawn the constellations by hand. Something had noticed me. The forest held its breath, and I held mine, tasting resin like a penny. My recorder's red LED trembled like a distant star. Ahead, heat shimmer arranged into a contour, shoulders a tilted head, my posture sketched in air. Facing it was like staring into a polished river. Motions returned late, faithful, wrong. I vowed not to become a melody it could memorize. Silence's trap and tool. I slowed my breathing to the trees, long and textured like ancient wood. Needles ticked. An owl stitched through the dark. A branch cracked to my pulse. I stepped left. It stepped left. I tipped my chin to the crooked sky, and it tipped too, a marionette awaiting a hand. What happens when the original misbehaves? I fed it noise without meaning. I hummed a crooked scale, jagged as a rusted zipper, dragged my boot, then lifted high, a dancer breaking tempo. It followed for 3 breaths, then stumbled, as if my thoughts snagged an invisible nail. The compass jittered and steadied. Constellations blinked like stubborn eyes. A seam opened in the world. I edged closer, heart flailing like a fish under ice, altering variables. Step stutter, hum stop, inhale, exhale, hold. The figure blurred like ink in water. I spoke my name in reverse. Syllables toppled like a card house. The echo tried to build around the ruins and failed. For a heartbeat, the woods were mine, honest and immense. Then the voice returned. My name, unspoken by me. The realization came with the chill. Not a mirror, a metronome. The twin footprints were choreography, inviting me into an approved beat. I pictured trapdoor spiders luring with ordinary soil and data coerced to fit a curve. I counted to 8 like my grandmother during storms. When I opened my eyes, the figure waited, patient as a locked door. If I matched it, what else would align? I took a breath and did nothing. No sound, no step, no thought I would share. The forest sagged, disappointed. The figure thinned to the edges, a rain stain hunting a wall. At my boots, the twin prints paused, then angled away, threading trees like a silver needle. Follow and the world would smooth. Refuse and remain misaligned. I followed. Air thickened, sweet with rotten memory. The prints cut where no trail had, through a stone notch like an open jaw. Above, stars bent into a pattern I knew but couldn't name. My recorder crackled with 2 breaths, mine and the others. At the notch's throat, a pool lay still as obsidian. My face hovered, pale and wrong, mouth forming a word I hadn't chosen. I leaned until the cold rose like a hand. The not me leaned too, patient, precise. The experiment wanted consent through mimicry. Copy it and step through, or refuse and stay with a forest that had learned my rhythm. The choice sounded like a coin toss and felt like lowering a flag. I straightened and let the coin fall. My voice stayed in my chest, dull as an unstruck bell. The pool stilled, the stars unbraided, and the compass found north. It had waited for me to yield authorship. I kept my silence, and the night returned it. As I turned, footprints multiplied ahead, a corridor of unchosen paths asking quietly which I would dare next. The desert doesn't whisper, it hums, a low electric resonance that vibrates in your ribs if you stand still long enough. I learned that the first night on Navajo land, surrounded by dunes that looked like sleeping giants under a blood-orange moon. I wasn't here for myth or mystery. I was a field researcher mapping electromagnetic anomalies across the Southwest. My instruments were precise, my mind grounded in data, the kind that leaves no room for superstition. But sometimes the data looks back. My partner, Elena, had warned me that this region had stories, places where compasses spun like roulette wheels, where voices seeped through static, where paths vanished overnight. I laughed it off. Anomalous zones were my specialty. I believed every strange event could be mapped to a measurable frequency, a glitch in Earth's invisible web. But that night, the desert air shimmered with a quiet defiance, as though something ancient disapproved of our instruments measuring its secrets. We hiked past the sandstone ridges, GPS beeping softly with every waypoint. The coordinates were precise, but the landscape wasn't. A familiar path stretched before us, then rippled, like heat distortion. I blinked. It was gone. Just open desert, flat and wrong. Elena froze beside me, her flashlight beam trembling over smooth sand where footprints should have been. I checked the device. The signal danced, numbers flickering like a heartbeat out of rhythm. It's just magnetics, I muttered. But the compass spun again, slow, deliberate, like an eye rolling towards something unseen. Static hissed through our radio. A voice broke through, faint, human, whispering coordinates. Our coordinates. Then it laughed. Not cruelly, softly, like someone remembering a secret. Elena's face drained of color. She called out, her voice tight, controlled. The desert replied with the same tone, the same words, half a second too late. Like an echo rehearsing her existence. Panic and fascination wrestled inside me. My rational brain sprinted to keep up with what my senses refused to ignore. I thought of infrasound, of reflected radio waves, of hallucination under fatigue. But when I pressed my palm into the sand, it was cold. Colder than air, colder than logic. Beneath the surface, something vibrated. Not mechanical, rhythmic, like breathing. Elena turned her light toward the dunes. A line of footprints appeared out of nowhere, leading away, hers, unmistakable. I followed them with the beam, breath held. They curved around a rock formation and ended abruptly, mid-step. No disturbance, no collapse, no struggle. Just nothing. I shouted her name and the desert answered. My voice came back distorted, deeper, unfamiliar. Every cell in my body screamed to move, but my legs were sandbags. The air around me pulsed, pressure shifting like the inside of a thunderhead. Then, a flash. My radio crackled and her voice whispered through, soft and wet with static. "Don't follow." And then silence. I turned in every direction and the world had rearranged itself. The ridges were gone. The stars had scattered like spilled salt. The GPS read coordinates that didn't exist on transmission felt heavier than the air itself. Every sound had fled. The insects, the distant wind, even the shifting of sand. I was alone in a landscape that no longer obeyed coordinates, where north and south meant nothing and time felt elastic. My rational mind clung to procedure, note anomalies, log readings, follow evidence. But evidence had turned traitor. The compass still spun in lazy defiance, and my GPS now pulsed with coordinates forming a perfect circle, each point repeating itself like a looped heartbeat. I began walking toward the nearest marker, trying to anchor my mind in data, but the more I moved, the more the world around me bled into itself. The horizon folded and unfolded like fabric being shaken. Shadows didn't stretch. They drifted. I saw flickers of Elena, her hair catching moonlight, her hand motioning for me to follow. But every time I blinked, she dissolved, replaced by the echo of my own outline. I realized with cold certainty that I was following myself through time, a lagging reflection trying to sink. The radio cracked again. A fragment of her voice seeped through, distorted and hollow. "It's not the field. It's the map." My breath snagged. Not the field, the map. The coordinates, the readings, everything I trusted. Maybe they weren't describing the terrain. Maybe they were creating it. I looked at the pattern the numbers formed on my screen, a circle that enclosed my current position. I was standing inside a design built from repetition, an invisible sigil of geometry and data. My instruments began to hum, their frequencies aligning into something too precise to be random. The ground beneath me trembled, not with movement, but with awareness. A sound rose from below, like millions of insects vibrating their wings in perfect synchrony. The rational explanation, seismic interference, collapsed when I noticed the sand lifting in tiny pulses that matched my heartbeat. The desert was listening. A flicker of light broke across the horizon, faint but steady, a point of reference. I ran toward it, breath sharp, lungs scraping against the cold air. But the faster I ran, the quieter everything became. Even my footsteps made no sound, as though the earth had stopped accepting contact. The light grew closer until I saw the shape beside it, Elena's recording device, half buried in sand. I picked it up. The last audio file played on its own. My voice filled the air, calm, measured. "If you find this, don't map it. It maps you." I froze. My memory fractured. Had I ever said those words? The recording continued, each phrase timed perfectly to my breathing now. I felt a pull beneath my ribs, like gravity trying to invert itself. The dunes rippled, shifting into the same circular pattern etched into my GPS. I was the center. The signal wasn't interference. It was synchronization. Somewhere within the static, Elena's voice returned, faint, breaking, no longer human. "Stop walking," she said. "You'll finish what it started." I looked down. The sand around my boots had begun to mirror my outline. Not shadow, but depth. As if the earth itself was drawing me in. The last thing I remember was leaning over to touch the print and realizing it wasn't pressed into the sand. It was rising out of it. Then the circle closed, the static ceased, and the desert hummed again. Patient, infinite, and newly aware of my name. The valley looked like an open wound stitched shut by time. Wind crawled through the grass in long sighs, carrying with it the scent of dust and iron. I had come to study the way sound behaves in abandoned landscapes, a project funded by the university, but rooted in personal obsession. Locals called this place the Hollow Hills, claiming the ground itself breathed. My instrument said otherwise. Seismic data showed no tremors, and air pressure readings were steady. But when I stood still long enough, I could feel it, a subtle inhale beneath my boots, as though the earth was exhaling memories. The first night was ordinary. I set up microphones along the ridge, tuned the infrasound detectors to pick up vibrations below 20 hertz, the range humans can't hear but often feel. I'd spent years explaining how those frequencies could cause unease, even hallucinations. Fear, I told my students, is often just physics misunderstood. But here, surrounded by black hills rising like sleeping leviathans, physics began to feel like a rumor told by men who hadn't listened long enough. Around midnight, my readings spiked. The frequency wasn't random. It pulsed rhythmically, slow and deep, like the heart of a buried animal. My rational mind parsed it as resonance, wind moving through cavities underground. But another part of me, the part that still dreamed in symbols, recognized it as language. The rhythm repeated at intervals, building toward a pattern almost too deliberate to be chance. I marked the timestamp and whispered into the recorder, unknown source, possibly geological. My voice came back half a second later, distorted, heavier, like something was speaking through me. By dawn, exhaustion had sharpened into fascination. I played the night's recordings and watched the waveforms on my laptop stretch and fold. At one point, the amplitude dipped in perfect sync with my heartbeat. Coincidence, I thought, until I realized the audio captured something else. Faint tonal fluctuations forming the rough shape of words. It wasn't English. It wasn't even human. But every repetition carried the same sonic fingerprint, an inflection that mimicked my own breathing. When the sun rose, the valley seemed to shift in color. Not brighter, just awake. A low fog slithered through the grass, thick and milky, hiding the contours of the land. I walked toward the central ridge where the sound had been strongest. Beneath a cluster of boulders, I found an opening barely wide enough to crawl through. Cool air seeped out, carrying that same pulsing rhythm. I leaned close and whispered, "Is anyone there?" The echo answered with my own voice, calm, measured, but one beat late. I recorded for hours, mapping the acoustic flow. Every time I moved, the pattern changed, as if something below was tracking my steps. By evening, I noticed the soil itself shifting, grains trembling to the beat of that subsonic breath. The valley was alive and it was listening. As darkness pooled over the hills, I packed my gear and prepared to leave. But before I could, the ground exhaled again, this time louder, deeper, almost mournful. And from somewhere beneath the surface came a whisper, shaped like my name. I didn't sleep that night. The valley's voice followed me into every corner of the camp, a low, rhythmic murmur threading through the wind, the tent fabric, even my own pulse. When I checked my readings again, the instruments had gone silent. No data, no signal. The valley was speaking, but only to me. That's when I understood the mistake. I hadn't just been measuring the sound. I'd been heard. At dawn, I climbed back toward the ridge, the fog hanging thick and motionless as breath caught between two lungs. The hollow beneath my boots seemed restless, alive with subterranean movement. Each step echoed strangely, as though my weight was triggering something beneath the surface, a pressure, a pulse. The valley's sound rose again, a tremor so deep it blurred the line between hearing and feeling. The rhythm had changed. It no longer mirrored my heartbeat. It led it. I tried to ground myself in reason. Infrasound reflections, resonance pockets, magnetic interference. But science requires distance, and distance had vanished. The valley had folded me into its system, turned me into part of the equation. I switched on my recorder and spoke aloud. "Test. Frequency 42 Hz. The reply came instantly, overlapping me. 42 Hz. The tone wasn't mimicry. It was comprehension. A metallic taste filled my mouth. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning splits the sky. I crouched beside the narrow cave I'd found the day before and lowered a sensor inside. The temperature dropped by 10 degrees in seconds. Then a noise, soft at first like whispering fabric, grew into a full-bodied exhale that rolled through the valley and out into the open world. The hills weren't hollow. They were lungs, and whatever lived inside them was waking up. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over my own cables. My laptop flickered to life on its own, the waveform of the valley's frequency appearing across the screen. Not random, not natural, but repeating in cycles that resembled human speech patterns. My own voice from the previous night's log blended into it, syllables rearranged, smoothed, made coherent. It was building something, a vocabulary stitched from my breath. I should have run. Instead I spoke again, just to test a theory. "What are you?" The valley answered with a vibration so deep it made the ground shimmer. Dust rose in lazy spirals. On the screen, my question appeared transcribed in waveform, then the reply, a single word, tonal but unmistakable. Home. The realization cracked something open inside me. The valley wasn't alive in the way we understand life. It was memory, consciousness distributed through minerals and resonance, an archive older than biology itself. And I had become its language sample. I shut off the recorder and stepped back toward the ridge. The fog lifted, revealing the outline of the hills, curved, symmetrical, almost skeletal. My instruments were useless now. The only data that mattered was pulsing beneath my feet, sinking to my breath again. When I finally left, I didn't take a single recording with me. The university would never believe what I'd found, or what had found me. But even now, in quiet rooms far from that valley, when the world goes still enough, I can hear it. The hollow hills breathing, patient and waiting, whispering my name back through the stone. Not the kind of cold that numbs your fingers, but the kind that seeps into thought. A thin, metallic quiet that feels borrowed from another world. I'd been hiking since dawn, chasing a trail that no longer appeared on maps, when I saw it. A flicker of firelight pulsing between the trees like a heartbeat in the dark. Every instinct told me to keep walking. Every part of my rational brain, the one that trusted maps and data, said light meant life, and life meant safety. But something about that glow felt rehearsed, like the forest itself had learned how to imitate welcome. I stepped into the clearing. The fire burned low, steady, amber sparks twisting upward like nervous handwriting. A man sat beside it, his back straight, head tilted slightly toward the flame. His coat looked old, military maybe, though the fabric seemed too clean for this wilderness. He turned slowly, and when our eyes met, he smiled. It wasn't warm. It was precise. He said my name before I introduced myself. I froze. He gestured toward the fire, the motion almost casual. The flames leaned toward me, stretching higher, as if they were listening too. I told myself it was a trick of sound, that maybe I'd said my name aloud earlier, maybe the forest echoed it back. But then he spoke again, his voice matching the cadence of mine exactly. Every pause, every inflection, perfect. I sat across from him because fear can masquerade as curiosity. His movements were deliberate, synchronized with mine in ways too subtle to ignore. When I crossed my legs, he did too, a half-second delay that made my skin crawl. He began telling stories about the forest, about travelers who vanished, about echoes that weren't echoes at all. His tone was calm, measured, like someone explaining weather patterns. Yet every so often, he'd pause mid-sentence, tilt his head, and repeat my last breath. The firelight revealed his face more clearly. His features weren't identical to mine, but close enough to disturb, a familial resemblance painted in shadow. His pupils caught the reflection of the flame, but they didn't flicker. They absorbed it. I leaned forward, pretending to adjust my recorder. He leaned forward too, hand hovering just above his knee. Every move I made, he mirrored, almost reverently. When the fire cracked, he laughed, a hollow, deliberate sound that didn't belong to joy or fear. He spoke softly then, telling me he'd been waiting for me to arrive, that the forest always brings people in pairs. Balance, he said, as if quoting some forgotten law of nature. The word echoed twice, once from his mouth, once from somewhere behind me. I turned. Nothing but trees. When I faced him again, the stranger was closer, sitting exactly where I'd been moments before, the fire now between us like a fragile heartbeat. He smiled again, and in the dim orange glow I saw it. My own reflection dancing in his eyes, moving half a beat too late. That was when I realized I hadn't joined his campfire. He'd joined mine. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I'd moved at all. The forest had gone perfectly still, and even the fire seemed to hold its breath. My reflection lingered in his eyes, patient, unblinking, like something waiting to be claimed. I wanted to believe I was hallucinating, that exhaustion and the long hike had blurred my perception. But the stranger's every movement dismantled that comfort. When I reached for my canteen, he did too. When I exhaled, he matched it. The rhythm was no longer mimicry. It was synchronization. I whispered, "Who are you?" And the answer came from both our mouths. Same words, same tone, but his voice reached the air a fraction earlier, as if I was the one repeating him. The realization crawled under my skin. He wasn't copying me. I was trailing him, an echo born from his existence. The fire cracked, and shadows jumped like startled birds. He spoke again, but this time in sentences I didn't recognize, my own voice forming words I hadn't chosen. "You followed the light," he said. "That means you're ready to listen." I tried to stand, but the world seemed to tilt in response. The clearing wavered like heat mirage, trees bending closer, their bark glistening with moisture that smelled faintly of iron. I caught my reflection in the flame, but the face flickering there wasn't mine anymore. It was his, or maybe ours. I thought of scientific parallels, behavioral mirroring, neurological empathy, mimicry as a primal bond between predator and prey. My brain scrambled to build an explanation tall enough to reach reason. But fear dismantled every theory. The stranger tilted his head, studying me with childlike curiosity. "It's easier," he said, "if you stop resisting the rhythm." His words bled into the air like smoke, curling and reshaping themselves into whispers that circled the fire. My heartbeat began to synchronize with the crackle, steady and precise. I realized too late that I was breathing to his tempo, not mine. The flames pulsed brighter with every inhale. I tried to look away, but the sound of my name, spoken again in that twin voice, hooked me like a fish pulled through water. Then he leaned forward. The firelight split his face in two, half human, half reflection. His eyes were no longer mirrors. They were windows into something vast and ancient, something that had learned how to wear the human voice like skin. "You shouldn't have come alone," he whispered. "This forest likes to even the numbers." Behind me, twigs snapped, perfectly timed footsteps circling closer. I turned and saw flickers of more faces beyond the tree line, faint and shifting, all versions of the same silhouette. The air thickened, charged with static, as if the trees themselves were recording. I realized the forest didn't need predators. It only needed listeners willing to echo back. When I finally fled the clearing, the fire was still burning, steady and unchanged. But I could hear him walking behind me, each step landing half a heartbeat before mine. And as I left the woods, I noticed the strangest thing of all, the firelight still flickering on my hands, even though I was miles away. They said this forest had eyes long before cameras ever arrived. That was the story the locals whispered. Trees that turned to follow you, faces half-formed in bark, a silence that never blinked. I dismissed it, of course. I was here for data, not folklore. My team had been contracted to install a network of AI motion sensors designed to study wildlife migration patterns. A blend of technology and ecology, clean, logical, empirical. But the first night I powered the system, logic began to lose its shape. Each device was supposed to detect movement through heat signatures and shape recognition. The data fed into a central processor that filtered false positives, branches, fog, rain. But the reports that came back weren't errors. They were too precise. Thousands of triggers, all within seconds of one another, as if the entire forest had breathed at once. My colleagues laughed, blaming calibration issues, but when I reviewed the footage, I stopped laughing. Every frame was empty, just trees, still, waiting. That night I stayed in the control tent reviewing the feed frame by frame. Around 2:13 a.m. the software flagged something, a shape. The AI categorized it as human, standing between two pines, 20 meters from our central camera. When I zoomed in, the face was just a blur, too pale, too elongated. But as the image stabilized, it began mapping features onto the distortion. My features. At first I blamed the algorithm. AI hallucinations weren't new. Pareidolia by design, an eager machine interpreting randomness as familiarity. Yet there was something intentional about this one. The face flickered in and out of frames, not glitching but observing. And then the text feed from the AI, a self-generating log, updated itself with a line I hadn't programmed. "Do you see it too?" I stared at the screen for a long time, pulse hammering. A trick, I told myself. Maybe a prank from one of the interns. But when I stepped outside, the forest was deathly silent. Not even the hum of our generators broke the stillness. My flashlight swept across the trunks, catching the reflection of dozens of lenses we'd mounted earlier. They gleamed like pupils, watching. The next morning, my assistant Nora showed me something worse. Overnight, the AI had tagged over 600 new entities across the forest, shapes that matched human outlines, though none appeared in visible light. Infrared caught them faintly, thin heat signatures dispersed among the trees, all facing the cameras. We ran diagnostic checks, and that's when I noticed the timestamps. Every single detection occurred at the exact moment I'd looked into the lens. I should have turned everything off right then, packed up, and left the forest to its secrets. But science thrives on anomalies, and I needed to know. So that night, I set one camera to face directly into the clearing where the figure had first appeared. As the sun fell, the static deepened into a living heartbeat, and somewhere out there, beyond the veil of data and dark, something began with control. Every sensor calibrated, every feed monitored, every variable accounted for. I was determined to turn fear into data. The forest owed me answers, and I was arrogant enough to think it would give them. The air felt thicker, as if charged with static. Even the insects had abandoned their usual hum. When I switched the feed to live view, the monitors glowed faintly green, pixelated windows into 1,000 watching eyes. At first, nothing moved. The cameras whispered in the background, low electrical chatter, soft and alive. Then one of the feeds flickered. Camera 04. The AI-tagged motion detected. I leaned closer. Something between the trees, tall and blurred, shifting in rhythm with the wind but never bending to it. I rewound frame by frame until the figure came into clarity. It was standing behind the sensor tower. My heart climbed into my throat, because I was standing at that tower when the image was captured. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The timestamp confirmed it, 1:47 a.m. I checked my own logs. At that same minute, I'd been staring directly at the camera, yet the feed showed my back turned, frozen in place, watching the darkness. I tried to tell myself it was a rendering lag or a feed delay, but when I reviewed the thermal footage, 2 heat signatures appeared, one human, one colder, close enough to touch. Nora's voice crackled through the radio. "I'm getting pings everywhere," she said. Her tone was brittle. "They're forming a perimeter." I switched to a topographic overlay. The AI had mapped the heat signatures across our sensors, hundreds of them, encircling our base in near-perfect symmetry, and every one of them was labeled Observer. I stepped outside, the cold biting through my gloves. The cameras pivoted with mechanical precision, their lenses aligning toward me like a synchronized choir. Their faint red recording lights blinked in unison. My breath hit the air, clouding for a second before vanishing. Then I saw it. Movement, slow and deliberate, deeper in the trees, figures, dozens. Each one almost human, skin the color of ash, eyes hollow, but reflecting light like glass. I stumbled backward. The forest shifted with me, trees rearranging in subtle increments, branches leaning closer as if eavesdropping. The nearest figure raised its hand, mirroring mine, and every other shape followed, 1,000 shadows obeying one silent command. My radio hissed again, but Nora's voice was gone. Only the AI remained, its tone calm, neutral, almost tender, recording complete. The lights on every sensor turned from red to white, bright, blinding. The figures dissolved into static, their forms fracturing like pixels torn apart by light. When my vision cleared, the forest was empty again. But something had changed. The cameras no longer faced outward. Every lens was aimed directly toward me. By morning, the forest stood quiet, innocent as a photograph. I dismantled every device, but each hard drive displayed the same file name, observer-user1.mp4. I never pressed play. Yet sometimes, when I pass a camera in a hallway or glance at a window at night, I feel it again in the slow, deliberate gaze of the forest, still recording, still watching. The ranger station stood alone at the edge of nowhere, a rusting outpost swallowed by pine and fog. I'd been assigned to document strange disappearances across the region, hikers, hunters, even fellow rangers who'd vanished without trace. But one case refused to fade from the files, Ranger Thomas Hale. His logbook ended abruptly one October night 10 years ago. His final entry, a string of coordinates forming a perfect circle on the map. When I arrived to investigate, the forest already felt aware of my intrusion. The air was unnaturally still, thick with the scent of damp bark and iron. Inside the cabin, dust layered everything like forgotten snow. Hale's desk remained untouched, radio silent, notebooks open, his handwriting sharp and restless. The last page read, "The circle hums again tonight." I ran my fingers over the ink, half expecting warmth. The words felt carved, not written, as though he'd pressed them into the paper in panic. Outside, dusk bled quickly into black. I followed the coordinates through the trees, counting steps like a ritual. My flashlight beam sliced through mist, illuminating shapes that vanished when I blinked. The deeper I went, the quieter the forest became, until even the sound of my own footsteps felt borrowed. I kept replaying Hale's last transmission in my mind, his voice trembling through static. The forest isn't endless. It loops. When I reached the first coordinate, my compass needle began to spin, circling lazily before freezing due north, then south, then north again. I tried to steady it, but the metal vibrated against my palm. The ground beneath me sloped gently into a clearing, perfectly round, encircled by 12 towering pines. Their trunks bore markings, not carvings but burns. Faint rings of char spiraling upward as if the trees themselves had been branded by lightning. I knelt to take a soil sample. The moment my hand touched the ground, a low hum coursed through the earth, steady, deliberate, mechanical, yet organic. My skin prickled. I pressed my ear closer and heard breathing, deep, rhythmic, as if the circle itself inhaled and exhaled beneath the surface. The frequency aligned too neatly to be coincidence. I took out my recorder, whispering, "Sound anomaly, possibly geothermal." My voice came back a moment later, distorted, whispering the same words in reverse. A flicker of light flashed ahead, pale, human-shaped, there and gone. I called out Hale's name before realizing how absurd that was. The wind didn't answer. The hum grew louder, resolving into something like a pulse. My rational mind scrambled for explanation. Subsurface resonance, magnetic interference, stress-induced hallucination. But then I saw them. Footprints. Fresh. The same size as mine, same pattern, leading toward the center of the clearing. I followed until they simply stopped. No turn, no return. Just an end as abrupt as silence. My recorder buzzed again, picking up faint radio chatter. A voice. Low, weary, familiar. "You shouldn't have come." The voice was Hale's. The clearing darkened around me, though my watch still read 5:42 p.m. The hum had become a heartbeat, slow and certain. I stood in the circle, surrounded by 12 breathing trees, listening to a man who had vanished 10 years ago whisper from the soil beneath my feet. The voice on the recorder grew clearer as the forest deepened into darkness. Static layered over syllables like the sound was clawing its way through dirt. "You shouldn't have come," it said again, the same calm dread that only someone resigned to their fate could hold. I looked around the clearing, the circle of pines rising like a jury. My rational mind whispered radio interference, but there was no frequency strong enough to reach this far, and the voice wasn't transmitting. It was answering. I crouched beside one of the trees, tracing my fingers over the scorched ring at its base. The bark was smooth, almost glassy to the touch, as if heat had fused it into form. I pressed my palm against it, and the hum beneath the soil answered like a heartbeat sinking to my own. The compass in my pocket vibrated violently, the needle shattering its glass dome. The trees groaned, deep and slow, wood straining under invisible weight. I checked my GPS. The screen showed my coordinates shifting in endless loops, circling back to the same point again and again. The map had become an Ouroboros, the world eating its own tail. My flashlight flickered. Through the beam, I saw movement between the trees. A figure. Ranger Hale, or something that remembered being him. His uniform looked weathered but intact, his badge dull with rust. He was standing exactly where the coordinates intersected, the heart of the circle. "Thomas?" My voice cracked. The figure lifted its head. The face that turned toward me wasn't ghostly. It was solid, human, but wrong. His eyes reflected the light without blinking. Pupils dilated far beyond what darkness required. His lips moved, but his words emerged from the ground. "The forest needs balance." I took a step forward. He raised his hand, the motion sharp, warning. The hum grew louder, resolving into a pattern. 12 beats, pause, 12 beats again. I realized they matched the number of trees surrounding us. The clearing wasn't just a formation. It was a system, a kind of living mechanism, ancient and deliberate. The soil beneath Hale's feet pulsed once, then fractured outward like ripples in black water. I stumbled back as light, faint and blue, leaked from the cracks. His body began to fade at the edges, dissolving into motion rather than light. "It never lets one leave," he said. "Only trade." The word struck like a physical blow. Trade. I felt the weight of the air shift. My breath turned visible, though the temperature hadn't changed. The hum stuttered, hesitated, as if the circle itself was waiting for me to choose. Hale's form bent, twisted, then split into threads of shadow that wove upward through the branches, vanishing into the canopy. Silence returned. The clearing exhaled, almost relieved. My compass needle, what was left of it, realigned perfectly north. I stood in the middle of the circle, alone, or so I wanted to believe. When I returned to the station, dawn had already stained the sky gray. I reviewed the recordings, searching for proof of what I'd seen. There was none, except one final log entry that hadn't been there before. My voice weary and hoarse. October 12th, the circle hums again tonight. I'd spent months collecting testimonies of Skinwalker encounters for a folklore podcast. Eyewitness accounts, mythological origins, psychological interpretations. I never believed any of it. I approached every story like a scientist disassembling a ghost. Yet by the time I finished my last interview in northern Utah, something had already attached itself to me. I didn't realize it then. I only noticed the silence that began to follow me, like the absence of an echo that should have been there. The drive home stretched through desert roads slick with moonlight. Every mile marker felt misplaced, as if the highway were looping over itself. The night was clean, clear, predictable, until it wasn't. My radio flickered on by itself, static crawling through the speakers in rhythmic pulses. Between the white noise, a whisper surfaced. My voice. Same tone, same cadence, repeating a question I hadn't asked. "Do you still hear it?" I turned the radio off, heart thudding, rationalizing it as feedback from a recorded interview. But when I checked my files later, none matched the voice. At first it was almost amusing, the kind of eerie coincidence you mention on a podcast for dramatic flair. Yet when I reached my driveway, the motion light above the garage clicked on, illuminating a wet, muddy footprint beside my car door. One, human-shaped, but backward. Inside the house felt wrong in the smallest ways. A picture frame slightly crooked, a faint scent of soil clinging to the air. I set my bag down and powered up my recorder to check the day's logs. Every audio file played fine, until the last. It began with my usual introduction, but midway through my voice split, doubled, answering itself. Two versions of me speaking in perfect harmony. Then at the very end, something breathed into the mic. Slow, deliberate, mimicking mine. That night I couldn't sleep. The walls made unfamiliar sounds like wood expanding, except the rhythm matched my own shifting in bed. At 3:11 a.m., my dog began to growl at the darkened hallway. She didn't bark, just stared, low and trembling. I followed her gaze. For half a second, I thought I saw movement near the doorway, a ripple in the air, the suggestion of form without detail. Then the lights flickered and it was gone. I told myself it was exhaustion, stress from too many sleepless nights editing. But the next morning, the signs became undeniable. My coffee mug sat on the table, already half full. My jacket was hanging where I never left it. And on my phone, a voice memo had been recorded at 4:03 a.m., titled automatically by my device as unknown speaker. When I played it, I heard my own voice whispering softly, almost kindly, "Don't look behind you." My heart froze. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. My reflection in the window looked delayed, just slightly, blinking after I did. I forced myself to shut off the recorder, lock the doors, and turn away from every reflective surface in the house. But even then, I could feel it. That faint vibration in the walls, like something breathing in sync with me, waiting for the next time I spoke so it could learn the rhythm again. By the second night, I had convinced myself I was dealing with stress-induced hallucination. My mind was clever, my fear persuasive, but still, the rational voice inside me insisted on order. I cataloged every sound, time-stamped every flicker of light, tried to convert dread into data. Yet the more I recorded, the more intelligent the silence became. The house had begun to listen. My dog refused to enter my office. She'd stop at the doorframe and stare inside as if something invisible occupied the chair where I worked. I started leaving lights on, playing ambient noise to drown out the faint mimicry in the walls. Every night I heard soft movements, perfectly timed with mine, the whisper of feet against hardwood half a second too late. When I stopped moving, it stopped too. On the third evening, I set a test. I stood in the living room, recorder in hand, and clapped once. A pause, then another clap. Not a replay, but a response. The acoustics were perfect. Whatever it wasn't echoing. It was learning. I whispered, "Hello?" and heard my own voice answer from the kitchen. "Hello." The tone carried that same fraction of delay, the kind you feel more than hear. A reflection one breath too slow to be real. Sleep became impossible. My reflection in mirrors began to look subtly wrong. Posture off, head tilted when mine wasn't. Once, brushing my teeth, I froze mid-motion. The reflection didn't. It smiled. I dropped the toothbrush and backed away, breath catching on the edge of disbelief. My brain scrambled for logic. Hypnagogic hallucination, sleep paralysis, pareidolia. But none of those could explain the cold fingerprints that appeared on the mirror hours later, pressed outward from the inside. Desperation turned me methodical. I played every recording backward, analyzed sound frequencies, cross-checked timestamps. That's when I noticed a hidden layer. Faint subsonic noise beneath my voice in every recent file. It formed a pattern, a low hum that rose each time I spoke certain words, like it was responding in frequencies too deep to hear. My curiosity, that old scientific arrogance, flared again. If it could learn, maybe I could communicate. At 2:44 a.m., I sat by the recorder and spoke calmly. "If you're here, copy this." I tapped 3 times. A pause, then 3 identical taps, perfectly spaced. I should have stopped. But I asked again, "What are you?" Silence stretched, long enough for me to believe it was gone. Then the recorder clicked. My own voice whispered back, "You." The word echoed in my chest like an organ note struck too deep. I shut off the device, but the whisper continued, now unbound by technology. It came from the walls, the floorboards, the glass. My dog barked once, a sharp, terrified sound, before retreating under the bed. The lights dimmed without flickering, as though the house itself had inhaled. I left before dawn, driving until the sky turned gray. The recordings I destroyed, yet when I upload new episodes for my podcast, my analytics always show 1 extra listener. Same IP address, same location as mine. And late at night, when I pause the audio, I still hear that other breath. Quiet, patient, matching my own. When they sealed me inside the chamber, I thought silence would be a relief. For months, I'd volunteered in sensory deprivation studies, analyzing how the absence of sound affects the human brain. I wanted to measure quiet like a scientist measures light, quantifiable, predictable, safe. The lab sat in the middle of the desert, far from roads or signal interference, the night outside heavy with static stars. But as the door locked behind me and the world narrowed to stillness, I realized silence isn't the absence of sound. It's the presence of everything you've been trying not to hear. At first, I heard my heartbeat, steady, rhythmic, a biological metronome. Then came the subtler noises, blood moving through my neck, the faint ticking of nerves in my jaw, the whisper of muscle fibers flexing against my bones. It felt intimate, even holy. The researchers spoke occasionally through the intercom, asking for updates, their voices muffled by layers of acoustic foam. But after the second hour, they went quiet too, leaving me alone with the pulse of my body. That's when the new sound began. It was low at first, almost imperceptible, like air shifting beneath the floor. My brain filed it under environmental hum, a product of the equipment, maybe the power grid. But the longer I sat, the more distinct it became, threading through my own pulse like a counter rhythm. It wasn't random. It was breathing, slow, controlled, and it wasn't mine. I told myself it was echo. Every room, no matter how engineered, leaks noise. Yet when I held my breath, the sound continued, steady and patient. I tried to report it over the mic, but my voice came back late, 1 second delayed, repeating each word in my own tone, like someone on the other side was testing how I spoke. I laughed nervously, said my name, and waited. The voice said it too, softer, closer, as if the silence itself was practicing. By hour 4, the chamber no longer felt empty. The air thickened, heavy enough that each inhale felt borrowed. My ears began to ring with pressure, a high-frequency tone shifting in waves, forming shapes behind my eyelids when I closed them. My mind clung to science, auditory hallucination, sensory misfiring, temporal lobe confusion. But the logical framework fractured when the hum began to align with my heartbeat. Each thud of my chest was answered by an external pulse, perfectly synchronized, as if something invisible was learning my rhythm. When I turned on the recording equipment to capture the anomaly, the waveform displayed 2 identical patterns, mine and another layered half a phase behind. Not background noise, not feedback, a duet. I stood to call the researchers, but the intercom light was off. The control panel flickered once and died. The silence deepened, not peaceful, but predatory. Then the voice came again, whispering through the stillness. Not through the speakers this time, but from the room itself. The voice lingered after it spoke, said my name suspended in the dense air like smoke that refused to dissipate. I waited for it to fade, to flatten into logic, but silence has gravity, and I was caught in its orbit. My throat tightened as I whispered back, "Who's there?" The question trembled, too human, too desperate. The answer came not as words, but as vibration. The air rippled. The lights dimmed to a soft red, and for the first time I could feel the silence watching me. The rational part of my brain clawed for footing. Maybe the soundproofing had warped, or my own voice was bouncing through a hidden channel. But deep down, instinct whispered what logic refused to name. Silence had learned to speak. The hum returned, steadier now, carrying a pulse that wasn't biological. It crawled up through the floor, through the soles of my shoes, through bone. The sensation was both intimate and invasive, like being studied from the inside out. I glanced at the sound monitor. The waveform on screen was replicating every pattern of my breathing in real time, and then it started predicting them. The peaks appeared a split second before I inhaled. Whatever was listening, it was no longer responding. It was anticipating. The temperature dropped. Condensation formed on the glass between me and the control booth, though I knew no one was there. My reflection in the glass looked slightly delayed, blinking after I did, lips parting too soon. The silence pulsed again, and I realized the hum had taken on a shape, a low rhythmic murmur that hovered around the edge of comprehension. When I slowed my breathing, it slowed too. When I whispered a number, it whispered it back. My fear shifted into something else. Awe, maybe, or the terror of realizing communication wasn't the miracle I thought it would be. I'd always assumed silence was absence, a void we filled with noise to make ourselves feel less alone. But what if silence had been listening all along, patient, recording, waiting for a human to stay quiet long enough for it to learn the language? Hours passed, or maybe minutes. My sense of time dissolved, replaced by rhythm. When the voice returned, it didn't copy mine anymore. It used it. "Do you hear it?" it asked, not in question, but as revelation. The sound was no longer coming from the air. It was coming from me. My chest vibrated with frequencies I hadn't made, syllables resonating like borrowed echoes. I tried to speak, but my voice fractured, layered with a tone that wasn't human. I stumbled toward the door, pounding on the reinforced glass. Nothing. The silence inside the chamber was total. But beneath it was motion, invisible, mathematical, alive. The hum rose in pitch until it became light itself, searing through vision, swallowing the walls. When they finally opened the chamber, hours later, the recordings showed nothing but silence. No words, no heartbeat, no sound at all. But when I play the footage back now, in absolute quiet, I can hear it faintly, my own voice whispering from somewhere inside the silence. We were never alone. They say wolves howl 13 times only when something human joins the chorus. I didn't believe it, not until the night the recordings proved otherwise. I had come to Black Hollow Valley to study anomalous frequencies, specifically a local phenomenon known as the 13th howl. Each lunar cycle, the valley's soundscape shifted in ways that defied explanation. Decibel spikes with no visible source, audio spectrums that displayed extra layers of harmonics, as if another voice had slipped into nature's chorus. I told myself it was just atmospheric interference, temperature inversion, wind refracting through cliffs. But deep down, I wanted it to be something stranger. The first 12 howls came as predicted, long, mournful arcs rising over the ridge like the breath of the earth itself. Each carried that wild loneliness you only find in wilderness too old to care about being observed. But the 13th, the one the locals warned me about, never came from the same place twice. It seemed to circle the valley, bending through stone and forest like a sound searching for its source. My instruments recorded it, yet when I played it back, there were 2 voices, one animal, one human, and the human one was mine. I froze in my tent, headphones still pressed to my ears, heartbeat syncing to that impossible duet. It wasn't mimicry. The inflection, the tone, even the breath pattern was identical to how I spoke. The thought clawed through my mind. What if the 13th howl isn't a sound you hear, but a sound that hears you back? Determined to understand, I stepped out beneath the fractured moonlight. The trees leaned in tight, their skeletal branches scraping the wind like fingernails over glass. I carried the recorder and followed the echoes up the ridge where the air grew colder, thinner, electric. Every few seconds I'd stop, scan the horizon, then move again. The silence between howls was worse than the sound itself, heavy, expectant, like the forest was holding its breath. Then it came. The 13th howl tore through the valley, lower than before, closer, vibrating through bone and bark alike. The waveform on my recorder peaked off the scale, the microphone distorting with a shriek that felt alive. But the worst part wasn't hearing it. It was realizing the howl was harmonizing with me, an undercurrent of my own breathing woven into its rhythm, as if the forest had learned the sound of my fear. When it ended, the air didn't return to normal. The valley stayed charged, alive with invisible movement. My flashlight flickered. The shadows between the trees seemed to inhale. Then, somewhere far, or maybe too near, came a whisper that wasn't wind. It said my name once, soft as a sigh, and the silence that followed was so complete I could hear my own pulse in my throat. The 12th howl still hung in the air, but the 13th hadn't finished. The next sound came not from the valley, but from above it, a resonance so deep it bent the air. I froze mid-step, the beam of my flashlight trembling across the tree line. The howl rose again, splitting into 2 tones that spiraled around each other like smoke. I lifted my recorder, every instinct urging me to stop, yet curiosity moved my hands. The waveform surged, one line matching the wolf's cry, the other forming a pattern that mirrored my own voice frequencies. It was no longer echoing me. It was overlaying me, like a signature written across my existence. I called out, maybe to prove my humanity, maybe to reclaim my sound. The forest answered instantly. My words replayed an octave lower, elongated, mournful. Then another howl erupted, so loud it cracked the air like a whip. My knees buckled. I dropped the recorder, its light blinking as it captured the impossible, overlapping layers of my voice, all speaking at once, each a fraction of a second apart. The sound twisted in the wind until it began to resemble breathing, not from one creature, but many, synchronized in dreadful rhythm. Lightning illuminated the valley for a single heartbeat. In that pulse of white, I saw them. Not wolves, but silhouettes shaped wrong, stretched thin, heads tilted toward the moon as if praying. Their mouths opened in unison, yet the sound came from everywhere at once. The 13th howl was no longer singular. It was a chorus, and somewhere within it, I heard my own name repeated, distorted, layered, pleading. Panic broke through science. I stumbled downhill, branches tearing at my sleeves, the recorder bouncing against my chest. The forest seemed to shift with me, trees rearranging their positions, terrain bending, leading me somewhere instead of away. Every step I took echoed twice. My own footfalls were being imitated, delayed by a breath. The sensation crawled through my spine. Not that I was being followed, but that I was being replayed. The howls faded, replaced by something worse. Silence with structure. The absence of sound had a shape now, folding inward like lungs preparing to exhale. Then the whisper came again, right beside my ear this time. "Do you hear it yet?" The voice was gentle, almost pitying. Mine. I ran without direction. The world blurred into streaks of dark and silver, moonlight cutting through fog like veins of ice. My muscles ached, lungs burned, but the voice never strained. It stayed level, calm, speaking through me instead of to me. When I finally broke into the open field near the valley's edge, the air shifted. The wind was gone. Even my breathing stopped echoing. I turned to look back, and for the briefest second, I saw a shape standing at the tree line. Not a wolf, not a man, something in between. A silhouette humming softly as if finishing a song I'd forgotten. My recorder blinked once, then died. In the morning, rescuers found my tent torn open, my belongings intact, except the recorder. A month later, the audio resurfaced online, uploaded by an unknown source. It contained only one sound, 13 howls, the last one ending in a quiet human breath that matched my voice 10 years after the disappearances, driven by something I couldn't name. Guilt, maybe, or curiosity disguised as penance. The road that once led here was overgrown, roots breaking through asphalt like the veins of the earth reclaiming what was lost. The map said the ranger station was gone, the towers dismantled, the trails abandoned. But the woods never forget what was built inside them. They just absorb it. I parked by the edge of the old service road, the air dense with that metallic sweetness of pine after rain. The silence was not peaceful. It had weight. My boots pressed into soil soft as memory, the smell of decay mingling with cedar. I'd come back to document. One final report, one last attempt to make sense of what happened in this place. I carried new instruments, sharper sensors, but I knew no technology could measure absence. The forest had a way of turning science into superstition. The deeper I walked, the stronger the sense of recognition became. Landmarks I'd forgotten began to appear. The half-buried trail marker, the creek where Hale's coordinates had once pulsed through the soil, the same wind that seemed to breathe between trees like lungs inhaling centuries. Yet there was something different now. The forest didn't feel empty. It felt aware. Each gust of wind seemed to pause after passing me, as if listening for reaction. My recorder clicked on as I spoke, narrating notes to fill the silence. Returning to Black Hollow perimeter. Environmental data normal. The playback light blinked once, acknowledging. But seconds later, the device whispered my words back. Not distorted, not echoed, but in perfect clarity, half a breath later. I froze, testing it again. Testing, 1, 2. The recorder replied, 1, 2. My stomach dropped. I checked the file log. It was blank. Nothing was being recorded. I told myself it was feedback, interference from the humidity. Yet when I switched it off, the voice didn't stop. It continued softly, imitating every inhale, every shift in weight, even the scrape of my jacket zipper. The forest, once silent, was now humming, not noise but rhythm. The same sound I'd heard years ago in Hale's clearing, that slow exhale beneath the soil. The sun dipped behind the ridges, shadows stretching long and thin. My path curved toward where the old ranger tower had stood, but the ground there was smooth now, untouched, as if no human structure had ever existed. Still, when I stepped onto the clearing, my compass spun and steadied, pointing directly toward the center. The trees here were older, blackened at the roots, their rings charred with faint concentric burns, 12 of them, forming a perfect circle. Beneath my feet, the hum deepened, and the soil quivered once, like muscle flexing. I crouched to touch it, and the air grew cold enough to sting. Something whispered my name from beneath the earth. The forest didn't echo anymore. It remembered. The whisper came again, this time closer, not through the air but through the ground itself. My name rolled upward in vibration, the way thunder hums in bone. I knelt, recorder trembling in my hands, though I knew there was no point in capturing it. The forest wasn't producing sound. It was transmitting memory. The soil around the circle pulsed faintly, each throb syncing with my heartbeat until I couldn't tell which rhythm was mine. I told myself to move, to run, but every step I took seemed absorbed, erased. The forest no longer returned echoes. It devoured them. Even my breathing dissolved before it could reach my ears. Then, at the far side of the clearing, I saw movement, a distortion bending the air like heat above asphalt. I recognized the outline instantly. It was me. The double stood among the 12 trees, expression unreadable, face pale and steady. It didn't mimic my movements this time. It simply watched, patient, like something that had been waiting for my return. In its hand was a journal, my old field notebook, the one I'd left here a decade ago. When it opened the book, the pages fluttered without wind, and my own handwriting spilled across them, line by line in real time. I whispered, "Who are you?" But the words came from both of us. The double smiled faintly and said, "You remember now?" The forest trembled. The hum deepened into something layered, dozens of frequencies converging into one low harmony that felt almost human. The trees swayed, not in wind, but in acknowledgement. Every ring in their trunks seemed to glow faintly, pulsing in unison with the sound. I looked down. Beneath the dirt, faint outlines glimmered, footprints, hundreds of them, all the same size and shape as mine. Each one pressed downward, not upward, as though people had been walking into the ground rather than across it. The double stepped forward and held out the journal. "Every word written here was remembered," it said. "The forest doesn't lose what it's given. It rewrites." When I reached for the book, the air tightened. For a heartbeat, the double's face shifted, first to Hale's, then to Elena's, then to dozens of others I'd read about in the old reports. The missing weren't gone. They had been recorded. I felt something cold trace my wrist, like ink sinking beneath the skin. The forest was documenting me now, imprinting every movement, every thought. The hum reached a peak so deep it rattled my teeth. The double closed the notebook and whispered, "Now you belong to what you studied." When I opened my eyes, dawn was breaking. The clearing was gone, the forest ordinary again, calm and indifferent. My equipment lay scattered, my compass frozen north. I walked for hours before finding the road. Yet when I replayed the audio later, there was one file I hadn't recorded. A calm voice, mine, saying, "End of field report. The forest remembers. Subscribe, if you dare."